Hi, GradCoff learners. This will be video number 3. We have already done some particular questions on question number 1. We have done 1.1, 1.2.1, we have done 1.2.2, and we have done some adjustments that relates to the statement of comprehensive income. Now we're going to look at more adjustments, and here is some of the adjustments that we're going to be looking at. We have done adjustment number 3. Now we're going to look at adjustment number 5. Adjustment number 5. Adjustment number 5 has to do with salaries. It says, all details in respect of the February 2022 salary of an employee were incorrectly debited to the sundry expense account. The following information relates to his salary. So we have the net salary as well as the deductions. It then says, the business contributes 2 rand for every 1 rand deducted for the pension fund. Note, EFT payments have already been processed for all relevant amounts payable. So this is very important. This is very important that all relevant amounts have been paid. But we need to record these amounts in our statement of comprehensive income. It is important that you understand what goes into your statement of comprehensive income. Now, in this case, you are given the net salary, and the deductions. So when I come to my salaries, here you can see I do not have the information. So I have to come and see how much was my salaries in the extract of information. So I'll come here. Here is my salaries. It says including contributions. It is very important. When you do this adjustment, you have to understand, is the examiner including contributions in the salaries and wages, or they are being recorded separately? Very important that when you do your adjustments in the statement of comprehensive income, please see whether the examiner wants you to include the contributions in the salaries and wages, or they are to be recorded separately. In this case, they were to be included. So we'll come here, then we have our salaries and our wages. And then I open my bracket and I have an amount that is 1,381,500. So I'm going to take that amount and record it in my statement of comprehensive income. So I'm coming here, I'm going to say 1,381,500. And then I come to my adjustment. I am being told that an employee were incorrectly debited to the sundry expense account. So at times they would say the details were omitted, but in this case, they were debited to the sundry expense account. Nonetheless, the idea is they were not recorded in the salaries and wages. Therefore, we must go and add them into the salaries and wages. So when I come to my salaries and wages, I will then begin to add. I will add my 11,525. That is my net salary. If I was given the gross, I would have just taken the gross amount at once, then I come to my contributions. But in this case, I'm given the net, so I'll take my net as well as the deductions. Then I'll add my 11,525, 11,525. Then I'll also add my deductions. The first one is pay as you earn, 3,235, 3,235. And then I'll also add my pension fund here, which is 990. Because here we are also including our contributions. It says the business contributes 2 rand for every 1 rand deducted. So I come to my deductions, which is 990, and I multiply that by 2. And then I'll get 1,980. So I'll come here, then I'll say plus 1,980. I'll close my bracket therefore, and then I'll get my 1,399,000 230. That becomes my salaries and wages. Very important that you remember, if you were given the gross, I would have just taken the gross and then I bring in my contributions. But in this case, I had to record separately the net and the deductions separately. And here the way he told us that all payments have already been processed. So I'm going to move on to the next adjustment, which is adjustment number 6. It reads, a tenant has been leasing office space on the premises since March 2020. She has paid the rent until 30 April. Note the monthly amount was reduced by 1,350 with effect from the 1st of January. So what we are having here is income that has been received in advance, because our financial period begins in March and it has to end in February. However, a tenant has been leasing the office space since March 2020. We are talking of the past. So from the beginning of this financial period, the tenant was in the premises and rent has been received until 30 April 2022. So instead of us receiving till February, we have received until 30 April. Very important. 30 April means we need to consider the full month of April. So the months that we have received in advance are going to be your March and April. So we have 2 months that we have received in advance. The financial year is for 12 months. So 12 plus the 2, that means we have received rent for 14 months. Very important. We have received rent for 14 months. We are told that rent was reduced by 1,350 from the 1st of January. Okay, that simply means when I come here from the 1st of January, rent was decreased by 1,350. 1,350 rent was decreased. So if I want to know how much is my rent per month, I cannot take this rent amount here, which is 183.6. I can't take the 183.6 and divide it by 14. That will be incorrect because rent was not constant from the beginning of the financial year until the end, and even for the extra 2 months. Rent has changed along the way. So the easiest way would be, I know there are several ways in which you could have done this, but let's see how much was the decrease therefore. So rent has decreased by 1,350, and it has decreased for how many months in this case? So we count January, February. So we have January, February, March, and April. That means rent has decreased for these 4 months. So I'll say 1,350 multiplied by 4. We want to know how much was that decrease. So if I come here, say 1,350, then if I multiply that by 4, that will give me 5,400. All right. So I'll get 5,400. This is the decrease in the rent for the 4 months, starting January until April. The decrease is 5.4. So if I take the rent that I have now, which is from the list of balances, remember, my rent is 183,600. If I come and I add that decrease of 5,400, I will have rent for the entire 14 months without any change. So I will now come and say my 183,600, and then I will come and I would then add the 5,400. If I add the 5.4, then I'm now having 189,000. So I'm coming here to say 189,000. This therefore becomes rent for these 14 months. Yet rent would be constant in that case because I have added the decrease. So I can then say the 189, I can divide it now safely by 14 months. So if I take my 189, if I divide that by 14, therefore I get 13,500. 13,500, this becomes the rent per month before decrease. Rent per month, that is before decrease. But I am well aware that in the month of March and April, rent was not 13.5. Rent had decreased by 1,350, as we're told here. So it simply means if I want to know the income that I've received in advance, I have to come and subtract the 1,350 for me to get the rent per month after decrease. So let me come here and see if I can come to this amount and say minus 1,350. Therefore, I will get 12,150. So I'll get here my 12,150. This is rent per month after decrease. But my problem here is I have received for March and April. So I have to multiply this by 2. So once I multiply this by 2, and then I will now get 24,300. So I'll come here, it becomes 24,300. This therefore becomes my rent received in advance. I'll adjust this to the income statement and to my balance sheet, statement of financial position. In my income statement, I'm now coming to say, at the top here, I'm coming to say rent income, all right? How much was the rent in my list of balances? My rent was 183.6. 183.6. Then I subtract my income received in advance for the 2 months, 24,300. And then I'll remain with 159,300, 159,300. The moment I receive income in advance, I have to remember that that becomes a payable. So I'll come now to my current liabilities and I'll come to trade and other payables. Trade and other payables. And I'll open my bracket. How much was my trade creditors? All right. So here's my creditors control, 428,000, 428,000. So I'll come here. I have my 428,000. That is my creditors control over here. I have income that I've received in advance, and that income is 24,300. That is how I would have done it.